Hi everybody, and thanks for joining me once again, where we're going to do another critique of the boys at the so-called Mastering Diabetes channel. We're going to do a safe, shareable critique of these boys and what they're about. It'll be unlike my usual style of presentation. I'll be professional. I won't use any words that are monosyllabic or have 4 letters in them, at least not bad ones, and we'll just deal with it in a purely professional and factual manner, and then you can do with this video what you will, people. So here we go. This is a little video put together by the boys at so-called Mastering Diabetes, a channel that for some unbeknownst reason enjoys just over 74,000 subscribers, and their advice to people around dealing with their diabetes is that they should pour carbohydrates down their necks 4, 5, and 6 times a day. In other words, achieve nothing absolutely but to exacerbate their issues still further. Let's deal with what they have to say though in a point-wise fashion, and you'll get what it is I'm about as we go along, I'm quite sure. So, Robbie, what have you got to say, son?
In the short term, when you become more insulin sensitive, you are going to improve your blood glucose control.
Okay, so here's Robbie telling you all about how you are going to improve your blood glucose control. Well, let's have a look, shall we, at Robbie's blood glucose control. Here is an image on the screen now of Robbie's blood glucose control statistics, and I'm afraid, Robbie, they are very discouraging indeed. I would suggest to you, son, that you probably ought to immediately cease giving others advice on how to control their blood glucose, because it is absolutely clear and patent that you have no ability whatsoever to even control your own. Your HbA1c readings there, son, are an absolute horror story. I know you're a type 1 diabetic. Nonetheless, I personally am acquainted with a number of type 1 diabetics who have as good and in fact much better qualifications than you do, in fact. For example, Dr. Ryan Attar, who maintains his blood glucose by way of the measurement of HbA1c far more tightly and at a far lower level than you do. So I would suggest that people should probably stop looking to Robbie and his business partner Cyrus for any kind of advice on how to control their blood glucose. Neither one of these boys has the first idea about how to control their own blood glucose, let alone tell anybody else how to do the same. So that's the first point. What's next?
You are going to make your blood glucose management far more predictable.
Yes, you are going to make your blood glucose far more predictable if you would just do one thing, actually, and that is to eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet for human beings, that being the flesh and associated fat of largely ruminant animals almost entirely, with very little, meaning in practice less than 20%, or as close to 0 as possible of any kind of plant material in your diet whatsoever. Actually, that is what the comparative anatomy, the comparative biology, the comparative metabolic studies, the anthropology by way of stable isotope testing tells us is absolutely our genetic gift and our genetic design. That is also anecdotally the diet which is coincident with the best health outcomes known. You won't find that in the so-called nutrition science, because the nutrition science is an area of theology, ideology, is bought and paid for, and does not actually encompass experimental, controlled, empirical science of any kind. So, what's next?
And of course, you're going to get a heck of a lot more energy.
Welcome to the Mastering Diabetes.
This is Darwin in action, actually, boys and girls. Let Darwin have at it, I'd say. Let God sort them out, whichever way you want to look at it. All right, what is next?
Audio experience. where we'll teach you how to reverse insulin resistance.
Oh, reverse insulin resistance. These two boys don't even understand what insulin resistance is, what the underpinnings of it are by way of cause and effect. Why do people exhibit insulin resistance? They neither seem to be able to differentiate between acute and chronic insulin resistance. Neither do they clearly understand how to ameliorate, because they think the answer to an inability to absorb and metabolize carbohydrate is to pour carbohydrate down your neck in ever larger amounts and avoid the very nutrient that they actually do need for health, well-being and longevity, that being the fat of animals, largely ruminant if you please, grass-fed ideally. Thank you. Neither of these boys has the first clue about any of that. Clearly, I've dealt with this ridiculous YouTube channel and the ridiculous nonsensical garbage that they put forward on a daily basis multiple times here on my actually science-based YouTube channel. Carry on.
Achieve your ideal body weight.
Yes, ideal body weight. Right.
Gain energy and get your best A1C following.
Our best A1C. Well, shall we have a look at Cyrus's A1C as well as Robby's there? Whoops. Both of them have absolutely appalling A1C values. Unlike Dr. Ryan Attar, whose A1C is spot on, Dr. Ryan Attar, who is also a type 1 diabetic, has A1C results better than most Americans who are not diabetic. And he eats a species-appropriate, species-specific diet. That being basically 100% carnivore, that being basically almost entirely the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals, mostly, other animals thrown in less frequently as well for variety and interest. And no plant material of any kind. It's almost as if Dr. Ryan Attar and myself and everyone that supports my fine science-based channel here understands something about human anatomy, human physiology, human metabolic systems, human anthropology that these boys do not seem to understand or don't choose to understand because it doesn't suit their profit margin, their bottom right-hand corner at the end of each tax year. There seems to be a bit of that going on as well. For a proof of that, let's have a look at a statement made very recently, publicly, by Cyrus, who is one of the partners in this channel, when he stated how much he genuinely desires to cure the world of type 1 diabetes and to help people with their type 1 diabetes. Shall we hear that statement unedited from Cyrus, word for word? Here it is.
Right? Now, if there was a magic pill that I could take today that would eliminate type 1 diabetes, I swear to you, I would not take it. I would not take it because I don't want to get rid of type 1 diabetes.
Awesome. Thank you, Cyrus. There we go. Confirmed. What's next?
Following almost 100 years of evidence-based research.
Evidence-based research, you say. I have yet to see Cyrus or his friend here, Robby, present a single piece of valid, robust, scientific, empirical, interventional science to support any of the claims they make about human health, human nutrition, or anything else. As a well-experienced senior academic, senior research scientist in my own right, a professor of health science in my own right, I do consider myself, also statistics, research methodology, and research ethics as well in my time. I do consider myself quite well credentialed, quite well qualified to comment on the level of veracity, scientific robustness, and goodness of fit for the general public of the disinformation put forward by these two absolute criminal charlatans. And I can tell you that I am not remotely impressed.
We're on a bold mission to reverse
Hang on. A bold mission to reverse
insulin resistance.
Insulin resistance, not diabetes. Cyrus has been quite clear about that. He doesn't want to do that because that will undercut his profit margin at the end of the year. He wants paying customers. He wants people to have diabetes, and he's going to misinform you and lie to you about the way to intervene, the way to treat diabetes, and he's going to say the answer is to deal with insulin resistance. Well, let me tell you something, boys and girls. The etiology, the underlying cause of the effect known as diabetes, and that means type 1, type 2, and type 3 diabetes, by the way, is not, N-O-T, capital letters, double underlined, not insulin resistance. The cause of diabetes is what the disease actually is, and that is chronically elevated blood glucose and nothing else. Okay? The insulin resistance, coincident with the increase in blood glucose, is a normal, actually health protecting, indicated response to the elevated blood glucose. It is not the cause of it. It is a response to it. It is there precisely to protect the cells from the glycative damage they would otherwise suffer were the system that protects the cells from that not in play. It is in play, luckily, and I'll tell you why. It's in play because it constitutes a series of enzymes that function in a cycle in the cell cytosol and also in the mitochondria of the cells. It's called the Randall cycle, and it's made up of enzymes, each of which is encoded for by a piece of DNA. That DNA having survived our entire history by way of both positive and negative selection pressures. It is there for a reason. Okay, it is a response to elevated blood glucose. The disease diabetes, whether you have type 1 or type 2 or type 3, is elevated blood glucose. Nothing else. The distinctions type 1, type 2, and type 3 distinguish between some of the underpinnings. Okay, type 1 versus type 2 talks about whether or not you're insulin dependent because you have completely destroyed the beta cells, or the beta cells are completely destroyed in your pancreas or not, or to what level. And type 1 and 2 versus type 3 is about the way that the disease manifests itself. Type 3 talks about some of the effects on brain function, whereas type 1 and type 2 are more systemic in nature. Nonetheless, the disease is exactly the same irrespective, and the disease is elevated blood glucose. Why is the blood glucose elevated? It is elevated precisely because of the Randall cycle, which protects the cells from glycative damage that they would suffer, precisely because you have poured a bunch of carbohydrates down your neck. Such being an ignorant, unfortunately, a miseducated view on appropriate human nutrition. Basically, carbohydrates in the diet are above a certain individual threshold level, which is very, very low, by the way, because of our genetic past. Above that certain level, carbohydrates, all carbohydrates in the diet, are a toxin, because they all break down to the same thing, which is sugar, which is a toxin in our blood above our individual threshold to cope with it. As soon as you go across that threshold, the Randall cycle is activated to a level that causes your blood glucose to start to rise, precisely in order to protect your cells. Ergo, the epithelial cells of your vascular tree become the sacrificial lambs. Your red blood cells become the sacrificial lambs. Both of those are replaceable quite quickly. So it's a evolved response to what is usually an emergency situation for the last 350,000 years, because carbohydrates were not available to us. Now they're available 24/7 all the time. We keep chronically activating our Randall cycles. That's happened in the last 8,000 years, but most notably in the last 100 years or so, further exacerbated by the problem of adding seed oils into our industrial seed oils, into our diet, and it's been absolutely disastrous for us, basically. That's the thing that's destroying public health. That's what we need to stop doing. We need to stop all seed oil intake and all carbohydrate intake. It's as simple as that. It really is. So this video, 8 tips to lower your blood glucose. Well, no, boys, we only need that one, which basically is follow a species-appropriate, species-specific diet. The flesh and fat of large ruminant animals mostly. Throw in some smaller animals here and there. Throw in some poultry. Throw in some seafood. Absolutely, no worries. So long as it is animal-based. Dairy, if you don't react badly to dairy and, you don't react badly to the fact that dairy has quite a bit of sugar in it, fine. No plants. Blood glucose, sorted. So we don't need 8 tips. I don't know why this video has been made, other than it's another opportunity for these boys to hang their soiled wares in public and mislead the public and bastardize science and lie to you and line their own pockets by telling you that insulin resistance is the cause of diabetes when it's not. It's a response to diabetes. And that they can help you with that, and all the while stating absolutely, ergo, what Cyrus said a few minutes ago, that he doesn't want to fix it. Awesome, awesome. What's next anyway?
In 1 million people. We're glad to have you joining us. Welcome to the Mastering Diabetes audio experience. Thank you for tuning in. We really appreciate your interest.
Oh goodness, Robbie, that's terrible.
And I'm really looking forward to today's show. So I'm going to be talking about non-negotiables.
Right, non-negotiables. Okay, Robbie, let's hear them.
So Cyrus and I were chatting with our Director of Lifestyle Change, Kylie Buckner, this morning.
Your Director of Lifestyle Change. Goodness me. Goodness.
And she was telling us how during our small group coaching calls, our coaching team is oftentimes sharing the non-negotiables that Cyrus and I both personally use
to absolutely fail whatsoever to control your own A1C, let alone help anybody else with theirs. Yep, good, carry on.
to maximize our insulin sensitivity.
Insulin sensitivity is not the issue here. Your blood glucose level chronically is the issue here. Remember, diabetes is elevated blood glucose, not insulin insensitivity. You are failing to address the issue, and you will never ever address the issue of carbohydrate metabolism failure by pouring more and more carbohydrates down your neck, Robbie. It will not work for you, ever. How do you expect to live a long life if you're going to continue this ridiculous nonsense? Please explain.
So during today's show, I'm going to share some of my personal non-negotiables that I use to maintain an A1C of 5.3%.
Which is absolutely appalling, Robbie. Appalling. That's not an acceptable A1C, even for a type 1 diabetic. I know that there are type 1 diabetics with much worse A1Cs than you. I understand that. They are in an even worse position than you are. But you getting them part of the way there is not the answer, because you need to get them all the way there. And there is only one tip that type 1, type 2, and type 3 diabetics, as well as the general public at large, need to understand. And that is, we have a species-appropriate, species-specific diet. And it does not include any significant amount of plant material or carbohydrate-containing material at all. Plus or minus milk and dairy products. I'm not a fan of them myself. Others are. I'm not going to argue with that, except to say that milk and milk products contain a lot of sugar, which is the enemy. Okay, and milk is designed for infants, pre-weaning, not for adults. And the milk of cows is designed for pre-weaned cows, not human beings. But that's all for another day. Right, let's carry on.
That's my current A1C. And my time in range is consistently above 90%.
Well, that's not good enough. You need to be 100% in range, and you need to adjust your range to more like what Dr. Ryan Attar achieves, which is an A1C, which is below the level where he would normally be diagnosed as a diabetic at all if he was type 2. The only reason he's still diagnosed as a diabetic is because he is type 1. And his control is plus or minus absolutely just about none at all. His A1C is consistent. His time in range using a continuous blood glucose monitor is consistently in range. Consistently, almost no variation at all. His control is far, far superior to either yours or Robby's or any of your clientele. Guaranteed. Okay?
All while eating well over 700 grams of carbohydrate each day.
Well, that is an absolutely appalling, terrible advice to give somebody, especially someone who is suffering from the patent effects of carbohydrate toxicity, which is what diabetes is. And it is a huge error. It will lead to a reduction in that person's health, a reduction in their quality of life, and a reduction in their quantity of life without question. Simple as that. You are an absolute charlatan, Robby, and you are a criminal misanthropist for giving people this dangerous, contraindicated advice. Please stop.
And using a physiologically normal amount of insulin, roughly 30 units per day. And if you're new to mastering diabetes, I just want to take a moment to recap why insulin sensitivity matters.
Insulin sensitivity is a response. It is an acute response to the situation regarding the concentrations of fat and carbohydrate in the blood and in the cell cytosol within the various cells and organs of the body. It is a response. It is, to all intents and purposes, basically immediately changeable upwards or downwards at any time. And when I say immediately, I mean within 30 minutes. Okay? It is not some long-term problem, insulin resistance. It is not a chronic condition, insulin resistance. Chronic insulin resistance is just acute insulin resistance that keeps being activated end on end on end on end on end by the same activation, i.e. pouring carbohydrates down your neck 5, 6, and 7 times a day, every day of your stupid life. Stop doing that, and within a very short period of time, hours at most, your insulin sensitivity will return to normal and baseline because of the mechanism by which that works. Okay? Simple.
So what we do here at Mastering Diabetes is
you misinform people on a grand scale. You fleece them of their money. You give them false hope that you will be able to help them with their condition, which you may do very slightly, but not meaningfully, because 5.3, 5.8, heading up towards 6 for A1C, no good, son. No good at all. That's not the answer. That's a short-term stopgap that will not stave off the long-term health complaints, conditions that those people will still suffer. This is a condition that is completely ameliorable, solvable diabetes. And I mean type 1, type 2, and type 3, so long as people wake up today and begin to act. The longer you have been suffering diabetes, the harder it's going to be to sort it out, obviously, but it is still ameliorable completely in the vast majority of people. As soon as they wake up and start to follow the appropriate regimen, which is not the one promoted by Robby and his friend Cyrus here. Okay?
We help you truly maximize your insulin sensitivity. I feel very proud to say that I think we are the leaders in this whole field of doing everything you can.
You are absolutely deluded, Robby. You are nothing of the sort. You are nowhere close to being a leader in the area of assisting people to deal with their diabetes. I don't know where you get this ridiculous notion from that you've just said, but you are absolutely, utterly wrong.
At every angle, from
No, false. Nonsense.
every opportunity to truly maximize your insulin sensitivity.
Well, that's not the answer. The answer is to deal with the blood glucose problem, because that's what the disease is. And the way you do that is stop pouring carbohydrates down your neck. One tip for lowering your blood glucose. Everybody, there it is. You don't need 8, which we still haven't got to the first one. You just need 1. Don't eat carbohydrate-containing food like slop. Eat meat and associated fat. Done. Continue to work with your healthcare professional if you are an insulin-dependent diabetes sufferer in order to get your dosage and timing right, of course. But your dosage requirements and timing requirements for your insulin will change vastly when you change your diet to a species-appropriate one, and you must keep on top of that with your healthcare provider. Okay?
That's what we do, whether it's food, whether it's movement, whether it's intermittent fasting, whether it's sort of a mental shift. We just tackle it from every angle.
You do nothing of the sort, Robby. You tell people who are suffering from carbohydrate toxicity that the way that they should solve that is to pour carbohydrates down their neck 6 and 7 times a day. That is criminal. There's no other way to describe it, Robby. Absolutely, fundamentally criminal. It must stop.
And look at the peer-reviewed evidence to help you achieve that.
Oh, the peer-reviewed evidence. Good. You got some of that? Should we have a look at some of that at all? Or do you just want to say the words peer-reviewed evidence to make it sound like you have something to do with science when, son, sorry, as a senior academic, as a senior scientist of more than a quarter of a century's experience, I can promise the viewers you are nothing of the sort. Okay?
That. And the reason this matters is because in the short term, when you become more insulin sensitive, you are going to improve your blood glucose control.
Yes, and the way to do that is to stop activating your Randall cycle, and the way to do that is to stop eating carbohydrates.
You are going to make your blood glucose management far more predictable.
Yes, by not eating carbohydrates, it will do that. Ask Dr. Ryan Attar for his numbers to establish that.
And of course, you're going to get a heck of a lot more energy. And in the long term, this is going to reduce your chronic disease risk.
Again, with the word risk, no, risk is a cause and effect statement. Risk implies that if you change a behavior, that will have a definite cause and effect and predictable effect on outcome. The only way to establish that scientifically is with a experimental, empirical, metabolic ward lock-in study. And if you want to talk about effects over years, then your lock-in study must go for years. You will never get ethics to do experimentation of that kind on human beings. Ergo, your statement of risk is not supported by science whatsoever, Robby, at all. No.
Which means that you are less likely to develop heart disease.
No. While I agree that eating a species-appropriate, species-specific diet will more than likely lead to a lowered probability of such problems, I understand science well enough to know that I cannot support that with interventional, empirical, metabolic ward lock-in studies conducted on human beings over years to support that claim. You don't understand that, Robby. Ergo, that's what the sort of thing that leads you to make errors. Like to look at a study where there is a statistically significant association between, let's say, a plant-based diet and health outcomes of some kind, which is, sure, statistically significant, but in effect, in terms of absolute outcome, in terms of its value as a statistic, so close to zero as makes no odds whatsoever, and also not cause and effect, but rather a coincidental artifact of what's called healthy user bias, then you then turn around and claim that your plant-based diet will reduce someone's risk of heart disease, which you cannot support with science. In fact, it's wrong. It is demonstrably an erroneous statement. Okay? What's next?
Cancer.
No, same deal.
Alzheimer's disease.
Same deal.
And many more conditions.
All the same deal. No evidence exists to support any of those claims of any kind that is remotely acceptable to a scientist. Proof of cause and effect is what we do. Empirical science. Okay? What you're talking about there is epidemiology, which is a form of sociology. It's a loose form of pseudoscience undertaken by crackpots, basically, who are destitute of any scientific discipline or ability to apply actual rigorous data collection techniques and reporting techniques. That's all covered on my channel as well in great detail if you want to go and have a look for that.
So, in short, you really do want to be more insulin sensitive.
And the way to do that is to eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet, which I've already described. And also, if you're not going to do that, if you're going to continue to pour carbohydrates down your neck 5, 6, and 7 times a day, every day of your stupid life, being more sensitive to insulin is not particularly going to prove protective against the disease process of type 1, 2, or 3 diabetes, actually, and its long-term likely ramifications that we know through long experience of watching people with these conditions and what happens to their health. You will still suffer the same problems. Maybe slower, nonetheless, you will suffer. Stop with the cognitive dissonance, son. Wake up. Okay? Bring yourself across to objective reality, that place that the rest of us actually find ourselves, Robby. And stop with the dangerous, contraindicated misinformation of the public. Stop fleecing people for money on a promise that you can help when you can't. All right?
And you want to put insulin resistance in the past.
Yes. And you want to do that by stopping doing the thing that causes insulin resistance. And that is dumping glucose into your bloodstream. Simple.
So,
see how the cause and effect is that way around? Pour in sugar, get insulin resistance. Stop pouring in sugar, get insulin sensitivity. It isn't the other way around, Robby. You've got the causality completely 180 degrees out of phase with reality. Wow.
With that said, let's move into a few of my personal non-negotiables.
Fine, you're finally going to give us some tips. These 8 tips we were promised, are you? This is nearly 4 minutes into your video, Robby. Goodness.
That I have been using for well over 13 years now.
Let's all listen to your 8 non-negotiables though, Robby, so that we know absolutely without question what to avoid so that we don't end up in the same boat that you're in, son.
So the first one is consistently keeping my diet low in fat.
Right, big mistake. Huge mistake. You have genes which are encoded for and exist in the form that they are in now because of at least the last 4.5 million years of positive and negative selection pressures, Robby. Those genes are informed by a history of that amount of time of eating the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals mostly, and not plants. Human beings have only eaten a more carbohydrate-rich, less fat-rich diet for about the last 8,000 years following the agrarian revolution, which was one of the most disastrous things that human beings have ever undertaken as regards public health. You are absolutely designed, from the metabolic pathways to the organ systems to basically everything about you as a human being, a member of the species Homo sapiens sapiens, you are absolutely designed to gain the vast majority of your effective energy from the fat of animals.
Okay? So that means, of course, low in animal fats, but
Wrong. Mistake. Big mistake.
also
It's incredible. The cognitive dissonance involved here. I cannot get my head around how you guys think this is okay behavior. It's not. Okay, let's make some progress.
low in plant-based fats. So that means being cognizant of how much avocado am I consuming? How many nuts and seeds am I consuming? 'Cause
You shouldn't be consuming any of those things. They're plants, and plants are not food for human beings.
these are foods I will eat
No, they're not foods.
regularly, but I will
Well, you shouldn't eat those regularly,
eat them in appropriate quantities. Like
which is none at all, Robbie. Okay, so if you were being truthful and saying you're eating plants in appropriate quantities, that is none. None at all.
selenium nuts, or not selenium nuts, Brazil nuts, which are high in selenium,
So is meat.
are something I'll eat regularly. I just love those. They're a great flavor. I do love avocado, and I'm living in Florida right now. There are some fantastic Florida avocados, and when I lived in California, I'd get
Yeah, and have a look at what that's doing to the water resources and environment over there, Robbie. You're right there on the spot. Just go and have a look. And if you can't be bothered doing that, have a look at some of the YouTube documentaries about what the avocado industry is doing there. Okay?
get some epic avocados, amazing varieties.
Absolutely ecologically disastrous, criminal destruction of the environment being undertaken there for that industry, for example.
Pinkerton, Fuerte, Lamb Haas, bacon avocado, like.
Okay, so your first tip is avoid fat. Okay, wrong. False. The vast majority of your energy should come from fat, and that fat should be exclusively animal fat, not plant fat of any kind. Great. So, wrong on your first one. What's number two? Come on, Rob.
Like, I love me some avocado, okay?
Yeah, you've said that. Let's move on.
But you gotta be careful. You gotta be careful and cognizant of how much you're consuming.
Yeah, you've said that too, Rob. So it's the vegan brain fog. You can't remember what you've said even several seconds ago. Let's move on.
So, keeping my diet low in fats
Yeah, you've said that.
and being cognizant of
Yeah, you've said that too, Robbie. Come on.
those yellow light foods. So even durian would be something is a higher fat.
All durians should be avoided, especially those ones that call themselves cyclists but really are not very good at cycling at all and live in Adelaide. Also a stinky fruit, just like the actual durians that he's talking about. Yeah, Robbie.
Fruit, I personally don't eat much coconut meat. I don't really eat olives that often. It's just not something I like. But definitely the avocado, the nuts and seeds. So I got to be careful there and just cognizant. So using.
Say the word cognizant again, though, Robbie, because it's a word that you've learned today from the dictionary and you would like to proudly use it so that everybody knows how clever you are. Good.
A nutrition logging software such as Chronometer.
Anyone who is cognizant of the science knows, however, Robbie, that you're nothing of the sort and you don't understand the first thing about science.
You can learn how much fat you are consuming. I cannot emphasize how important.
Typical, go and get yourself a calorie tracker software package. No, that's not required. All you need to do is eat a species-appropriate, species-specific diet to satiety. That's it. We've survived in our current speciation of Homo sapiens sapiens for 350,000 years without software to tell us how to do that. And in very, very similar speciations prior to our own eventual one for around about 4.5 million years. Okay? All without computer software to tell us how to do it.
This is how it is worth your time. It is
No, it isn't.
so worth it.
No, it isn't.
We hear oftentimes how our members are frustrated and sort of.
Well, they should be, because you are fleecing them, you are ripping them off, and you are misinforming them with dangerous contraindicated advice that will not lead to an amelioration of their health concerns long term. Okay? Stop it.
maybe just not enjoying the process of food logging, and we get it.
It's because it's unnecessary and it's onerous.
Okay? It is a pain in the butt. 100%.
So are you, Robby. Nonetheless, we're dealing with it.
But it's worth it. And the information that you get from logging your food is information that you will learn and integrate for the rest of your life. Like you're learning.
Which will be somewhat shorter if you follow the advice from these two charlatans.
Learning lessons. Like many people, you're just not sure. You don't know how many grams of fat are in that handful.
I know exactly how many grams of fat that I am consuming in my diet. It's very, very straightforward. I also don't care.
Of nuts. Okay? How many grams of fat's in that half of an avocado? How does that affect your total percent of calories coming from fat, even when you have a small amount?
Can we move on to your second point, for goodness sake, Robby? You've said eat low fat. You're wrong. What's next?
And especially when it comes to including a little bit of oil or even some...
Don't consume oil in your diet ever, people. Oil is absolutely, totally contraindicated. All the fat you consume should be in the form of animal fats, which are largely saturated, i.e. solid at room temperature, i.e. not oil. Okay?
Animal products, like you will learn so much when you take the time to log this into food logging app. Okay?
Nonsense.
Okay? And so we also encourage you to use decision trees. So decision trees, that's our version of a diabetes logbook, okay?
Oh, God.
And this is going to help you truly understand.
Nothing you say, Robby, is going to help anybody understand with any level of correctness or scientific veracity or validity anything at all. All you are going to do is misinform people and possibly lead them to make decisions which will cost them life, duration, quality of life, long term, and it will also cost them a lot of money, which you are fleecing them of. You criminal.
How eating a low-fat diet improves your blood glucose control, and how, when you don't do that,
it doesn't.
The
way to improve your blood glucose control is stop pouring glucose into your blood. The way to do that is to stop eating carbohydrates. All of them. All carbohydrates break down to sugars, glucose in the blood, with the exception of fructose, which goes directly to the liver and is directly metabolized to fat. Okay? Knock them all off. Then your blood glucose level will be controlled entirely by the process of gluconeogenesis, which is demand-driven and not supply-driven. Problem solved. It's not rocket science. Straightforward. And I just gave you that for free. But you continue to pay Robby and Cyrus to misinform you and cost you your health and life duration all you like, you 74,100 subscribers. It's Darwin in action. Go for it.
Consequences of that decision. So decision trees are a fantastic tool, and I use decision trees on a regular basis.
And look at the results of your decisions in life, Robby. Stop with the arrogance and the cognitive dissonance and realize that you are in an error, vastly in error in your ways.
I love to use them to check in. I use them a heck of a lot more consistently when I was first starting. And again, that's to get some baseline information, to learn. And you get to...
How come you haven't learned anything then so far, Robby? How is it that you still believe that the way to deal with a toxicity issue, toxicity meaning a level of glucose in your blood which is chronically far too high, as a result in your case of a autoimmune dysfunction, but the way to deal with it in your mind is to pour more and more and more of that toxin down your neck and avoid the very thing that you actually vastly, grossly are deficient in, the thing you absolutely need to improve your health, the fat and the protein that comes along with that. How is it that you still believe a plant-based diet is the answer to the problem here? That it seems that you've learned absolutely nothing. Feedback, son. Look at the feedback you are getting from the universe on your activity as regards to your condition. Are you getting better?
A stable point at some point, and you don't need to use them as often, but they're always helpful. And anytime I use a decision tree, I can pretty much guarantee that I'm going to see one of my better days of time in range, and it's just really, really helpful when you put in that time and that effort. So in the beginning, definitely take the time to log your food into Chronometer, definitely use decision trees, and keep your diet low in fats. That's just a complete non-negotiable for me and something I've been doing consistently.
Okay, so point 2, clearly, is use software to track your intakes. So wrong on avoiding fat and wrong on using software. Right, so 2 out of 2 wrong. What's number 3?
Now, the second non-negotiable here
Oh, okay, so that was part of 1. Well, wrong on both parts of part 1. What's part 2 then?
is keeping my food exclusively plant-based.
Right, wrong. False. Mistake. Plants are toxic to human beings at more or less levels depending on the particular species of plant. They have effects which are more or less immediate, but nonetheless they are all toxic. Plants are not food for human beings. We are not designed to eat plants for food or nutrition. Wrong. Okay, that's that one taken care of. Very straightforward. What's next?
I eat plants. I've been eating nothing but plants.
Well, look how healthy that's made you, Robbie. Look how well that's led you to control your A1C. Not, which is the way of measuring that your diabetes process is either under control or not. And the answer is not. Good.
Plants for over 13 years, and I love them.
You love them, you might. They clearly don't love you, Robbie. Of course they don't, because your speciation is Homo sapiens sapiens, which means that you are, whether you like it or not, Robbie, an obligate hypercarnivore.
And you got to understand that every time you make a decision to eat something other than a plant, not only are you exposing yourself to the consequences of those foods.
Wrong. Unless you mean the consequences being radiant health, lowered inflammation, increased energy, lowered adiposity, improved A1C, completely ameliorated insulin resistance issues, great libido, great musculature, all of those things. You'd be right, but you're probably going to give us a bunch of so-called consequences of non-plant foods, and you're going to get them all wrong, absolutely wrong. Let's go, though.
But you're also trading calories.
Calories, Robbie, are a measurement of heat, not energy contained in foods. Okay? How do you eat heat, Robbie? You don't. Is the energy that you expend in the form of heat? No, it isn't. It's in the form of a chemical storage form, that being ATP, that being encapsulated by reducing equivalents in the form of hydrogen atoms off the carbon skeletons of food that you consume, thus releasing the energy to then encapsulate that energy into the ATP molecules. A lot of people will talk about thermodynamics and heat equivalence principle and all that being at play here. It's not. Thermodynamics is A, based on the assumption of an isolated thermodynamic system, which A, doesn't exist anywhere in the universe, and B, human beings are the furthest thing from. We are open systems, so before you want to go to the thermodynamics argument, you should probably read thermodynamics and then come back to me with an understanding of it, which I do have as a professor of health science and all the underpinning physics and chemistry of that. Okay?
For these unhealthy ones where the package is not so helpful.
Unhealthy. That would be a cause and effect statement. That would require an experiment over a number of years with human beings locked in labs. Got one of those, Robbie? Okay.
You're trading that.
No, you're guessing, Robbie. You're pushing an ideology. You're pushing a theology. It's false. It's disingenuous. It's dishonest. It's dangerous. And you should be basically going to prison for espousing it, because it is wrong, demonstrably.
You're consuming calories there that you're not consuming from plant-based foods.
Consuming heat, are you? How do you consume heat? You can absorb heat from the environment around you, but you can't use that for metabolic process because the energy for metabolic process is in a chemical form, which is not equivalent to the heat form. No, it isn't. Whoops.
So you're sacrificing the intake of the vitamins, minerals, antioxidants.
No, I'm not short of any vitamins, minerals, or antioxidants, Robbie. I've been eating an almost exclusively animal-based diet for the best part of 6 years. And more recently, absolutely 100% carnivore. No scurvy, no falling down dead of heart disease, no strokes, no sign of atherosclerosis heart disease, no sign of hypertension, no real signs of any serious health problems of any kind, actually, or any symptoms of any form of deficiency whatsoever. Gosh, there goes that argument. And I can point you to tens of thousands of devotees of the carnivore diet who will report the same and will come on camera and look as healthy and radiant as I do at my young tender age of nearly 50.
The fiber that you're going to find.
Fiber is a contraindicated thing in the human enteric system, in your guts. Fiber is not useful. Fiber is not required. Fiber does not protect you from any kind of health problem. Fiber is problematic. Fiber is pro-inflammatory, pro-irritant, pro-leaky gut, pro-constipation. Do a search on Dr. Paul Mason and fiber, and you'll learn all about that with some experimental evidence thrown into boot. Some actual experimental evidence, Robbie. Okay?
In plant-based foods. So for me, that's just a simple, straightforward, non-negotiable.
Okay, and it's wrong. Okay, you are not a herbivore. And the word is herbivore, not herbivore. There's an H on it. Herbivore. You're not one. You are an obligate hypercarnivore. See how that's got an H on it as well? See what I did there? Right. Anyway, you are a hypercarnivore, not a herbivore. Your genes, your organ systems, the anthropology, everything is in line on this. Okay? You are in error, Robbie.
I eat plants.
No, wrong. Wrong thing to do.
That's simple. Now, the third one here.
Right. So, avoid fat, wrong. Eat plants, wrong.
Very important is whole food.
Yes. Whole meat, including the fat that comes with it. Whole organs if you're into eating organ meats. Yep.
I eat whole foods predominantly.
So do I, entirely. Whole meat, whole fat. It all comes as a package. It all gets eaten.
Not minimally processed foods.
Yeah, same with meat. Minimally processed is good, or not processed at all, or even better.
In my diet is very, very low. Very low. And this is huge. Absolutely huge.
If you're eating carbohydrates, maybe. We'll get to that, though.
When it comes to blood glucose control and maximizing your insulin sensitivity.
Well, if you want to do both those things, then eat the flesh and fat of largely ruminant animals. That'll do it.
And reducing or eliminating the spikes that oftentimes people are concerned about when beginning to add in more whole carbohydrate-rich foods. So,
carbohydrate is not food. Food for human beings is in the form of protein and fat. We have a very small requirement for carbohydrates relative to those other two macronutrients. However, our requirement dietarily for the intake of carbohydrates is not 1 gram ever, 0, because if you look in any biochemical textbook, you will find that there is a thing in a human system called gluconeogenesis. That is where a human being takes the backbones from the glycerol backbones from triacyl glycerol molecules, the fat that is being oxidized, or lactate as a result of carbohydrate metabolism, for example, And also there are 1 or 2 gluconeogenic amino acids, proteins as well. And those non-carbohydrate precursors can be manufactured into glucose in the human body. Ergo, we have no requirement for the intake of glucose or glucose-containing things, i.e. carbohydrates, at all. Not 1 gram ever. Given also that gluconeogenesis is demand-driven and not supply-driven, that also ameliorates the risk of toxicity of glucose in your blood, which you will absolutely get if you pour carbohydrates down your neck 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 times a day every day of your stupid life, thinking that you're doing yourself a favour when you are doing no such thing. Okay?
These are intact whole foods. When I have a breakfast, it's just going to be some cut up bananas, some cut up mangoes, and some greens. And boom, there you have it. It's just...
That's not food, Robbie. None of that's food. That's all nonsense. That's plant material, not food.
the whole food right there.
No, that's not food. That's whole plant material, but plants are not food.
Right?
No, wrong, Robbie.
So very simple. And that leads...
So the idea of eating whole food is correct, but you have no idea what food is and what food isn't, Robbie. So still no points for you in your 3 things that you've suggested so far.
leads me to my next non-negotiable, which is that I eat greens or non-starchy vegetables at pretty much every meal.
Right, well, that's a mistake as well. Plant toxicity is a real issue there, as is the adding into your colon there of indigestible fibres, which will most likely cause you enteric function difficulties, either short or long-term or both.
And I thoroughly enjoy it. I love...
Well, enjoyment's got nothing to do with it, though, Robbie. The reason that we eat is so that we might live. It is not the other way around. And by the way, talk to a carnivore about whether they enjoy their diet, and you'll get rave reviews. Okay?
my greens. Arugula is one of my favorite foods on the entire planet. It's got a little bit of a kick. So if you're not eating arugula, or they call it rocket in Australia.
It wouldn't take much of a kick to blow you over, though, would it, Robbie? A mild gust would probably do it.
Yeah, if you're not eating that on a regular basis, I hope you consider adding it.
No, I won't be doing that because it's a plant and that's not food, Robbie. Because I understand the science, I understand human nutrition requirements, I understand the physiology, the metabolic systems, the anthropology, all of it, and you clearly do not.
If that's the one thing you do from this podcast, you start eating more arugula, I'd be very happy. I
Well, nobody really cares, Robbie, about what makes you happy. That's not the point here.
also eat a lot of spinach.
All right, so oxalate, great. Go and look up oxalate and its dangers there, Robbie.
I eat kale, Swiss
Same thing.
chard.
Same thing.
Been getting some good okra here in Florida recently, so that's been fun. So lots of bell peppers.
Right, so capsaicin, another toxin, good.
That's lots of zucchini, summer squashes. I'm not a huge fan of cucumber, but I love zucchini. But really, it doesn't matter. It's any green or non-starchy vegetable that you enjoy and you will eat consistently. So,
Well, that's a bad idea because that's all plant material, and plant material is not food for human beings. The role of plant material, as that relates to human beings, is that certain selected extracts from certain herbs and other plants that are available to us on the planet do have medicinal purpose, Robbie. And humans have worked out what those are over the years, over the millennia, and we have a great deal of knowledge about that. That's their role, medicinal. Okay, not food.
that's a huge non-negotiable for me. And again, that's pretty much every meal.
Okay, so wrong again. Right, what's next?
The next one here is daily movement. And this is walking at a minimum. So I get the best results when I'm doing consistent cardio in the morning.
Okay, that's a mistake. Okay, as one of the things that I have an advanced research degree concerning is exercise physiology, and I can tell you that a lot of cardio training is absolutely, utterly contraindicated. And if you need to do a bunch of cardio to keep your blood sugar even under the very, very poor control that you currently have it, Robbie, that's another pointer to the fact that your diet is wrong. The benefits of appropriately programmed, appropriately intense appropriately short duration burst and repeat activity physically are absolutely without question. I'm not saying don't exercise. I'm saying the kind of exercise you're talking about, A, is contraindicated for your long-term health, for your muscularity, for your cardiac health, if you had any of that, which I very much doubt, given your lack of blood glucose control, etc. You're an absolute disaster waiting to happen, Robbie. You need to buck your ideas up on that. Okay, come and watch a lot of my videos on my channel about exercise physiology, and you'll learn a lot about that as well. Currently, it's clear that you know nothing about that either. Okay, so wrong again.
That's ideal for me.
No, it isn't. That's the worst thing you can do. If you have to do that to keep your blood glucose under control, surely that should be a sign that your diet is wrong.
I like to get it done before the day starts and I get too many work things happening, and all of a sudden you get distracted and you have a million excuses to not get in that cardio. So for me, doing it in the morning before...
Okay, so don't do cardio, please, people, ever.
I get into, too much stuff is really, really...
Very, very light activity that doesn't raise your heartbeat much over 100 if you're a 20-year-old person. Fine, that's not really even exercise, that's just incidental activity, that's fine. Very, very high intensity burst and repeat activity, preferably resistance work, is absolutely indicated. Everything in the middle, don't ever do that as exercise training, ever, okay?
Really helpful. And also, doing consistent cardio in the morning is beneficial.
Is a mistake, don't do that.
Beneficial.
No, it's not, Robbie. False.
Because if you're living with insulin-dependent diabetes...
Insulin-dependent diabetes. Go on.
And using fast-acting insulin, then you will not have a...
Or you could eat a diet like my friend Dr. Ryan Attar eats, which doesn't require him to use fast-acting insulin whatsoever. He uses the older, much slower form, gets a much, much tighter control, hence much, much better A1C results, much, much better health, much better musculature. He's a man, he's masculine, he's muscled, he's a returned serviceman. Proper staunch. Sorry to keep coming back to this, but something needs to get through to you at some point, somehow. I don't know what it's going to take. I doubt that anything will to actually get through to you personally, Robbie, but I want your supporters to watch this video and listen to it. How vastly, grossly, utterly misguided they are by listening to your ridiculous nonsense, Robbie.
Large amount of insulin on board. So definitely, I personally will inject a little bit, whether that's a little bit for maybe a celery juice that I'm consuming.
Celery juice, goodness me.
Or maybe I'm having a few dates before I do a workout. I'll have a little...
I doubt you get any dates ever, Robbie.
Little bit of insulin to get something on board there. It also helps address the Down phenomenon, but it's not a large amount, okay? And that can make exercise a heck of a lot more challenging when there is a lot of insulin on board.
Well, you shouldn't be doing that kind of exercise anyway, Robbie.
And you are beginning to do cardio.
Which you should not do.
You can just start seeing those double arrows down on your Dexcom or CGM if you wear one. You know what I'm talking about. But daily movement is an absolutely non-negotiable for...
Okay, yes, but you got the form that it should take completely wrong, so still no points for Robbie at all. Halfway through his list, nil point 0.
For me, and I love walking.
Again, nobody cares about what you like or love, Robbie. It's got nothing to do with people's health outcomes.
I cannot tell you how much I love walking and how much we recommend it and how it makes such a big difference. Like, you will be blown away.
No.
By how much of an improvement you can see.
In what, Robbie?
In your blood glucose control.
Well, the best way to get control of that is to not pour carbohydrates down your neck, Robbie.
In your numbers after meals, in your fasting readings.
Even better if you do appropriate, intense exercise, which has a far better effect on things like the accumulation of GLUT4 in your muscle cell membranes, for example. Like the fact that will help to drain unnecessary carbohydrates through your system and thus ameliorate the Randle cycle issue somewhat, for example, Robbie, that kind of stuff. Plus, it's also not coincident with the damage that will be done to your system by a lot of long, slow, steady state aerobic style activity, which is absolutely contraindicated. Wow, it really is raining hard now.
Begin to start walking consistently. And I basically do anything on my phone that I can do. Basically, if there's a task on my phone that I can do while walking, I will go outside and walk. Now,
Dreadful, Robby. Dreadful.
it's also raining a lot in Florida, so if it's raining, I'll stay inside. But sometimes I could even walk around inside, walk up and down the stairs. But it seems a little crazy, but the impact is so good. I know it might feel a little weird to just start walking around your house, but in a line, I do that a lot when I'm on the phone. But it's just really, really beneficial. And
No, it isn't.
walking is a great opportunity to connect with loved ones, okay? So this goes beyond just the physical benefit. Walk with your partner, walk with your dog, or if you're walking by yourself, you can call a friend. It's just a great opportunity to connect and really take that space. So daily movement,
Move on, Robby, for goodness sake.
definitely a non-negotiable. Now, I've put consistency on this list. And for me, that is something that I am committed to. This
Consistently doing the wrong thing absolutely is what you're committed to, Robby. Consistently undercutting your own health status, your own longevity, and probably your own quality of life consistently is what you're doing. It's a mistake, son. You are lining your pockets in so doing. You are fleecing people of their money in so doing, and you are criminally, misanthropically misadvising them, all of which will come back to you, son. Karma is a real thing. Okay?
this idea of, I'll go to a party and maybe I'll just eat something off the program at the party and it'll be okay. I'll get back on it later. Or, once a week I'll do X, Y, and Z. Like that to me, that's not worth it. It's a choice that I've made. Look, we're not the food police here. You got to decide what changes are you going to make that resonate with you. How far are you going to take it? That's totally up to you. It's based on your goals. And
if, however, though, Robby, you wanted to give people advice based on their goals, which would be health, vitality, longevity, all of those things, then you would be required to give them robust, scientifically valid advice, and you fail on that count. Utterly, in the worst way, in the most destitute fashion possible. You should be in prison for what you're doing here, Robby. This is nothing short of criminal misanthropy.
how important they are to you and what you're willing to do to achieve them. So for me, being consistent and just not making exceptions on what I do is what I consider a non-negotiable here. I will
Right, and look where that's got you, Robby.
be consistent. I put myself first.
You clearly don't, Robby. You clearly do no such thing. Look at your A1C. Check your health markers, son. You're in a bad way. You will not make old bones doing what you're doing. Enjoy the money, though.
think health is such a priority.
Then sort your life out, son, because you're going the wrong way 180 degrees. You need to turn around 180. Seriously.
That I am going to stick with it, and I'm just not going to let anybody be in charge of what I eat. Like
And yet you're telling others what to do and getting it wrong, and telling them they too can have health that's as poor as yours, Robby. All they need to do is listen to what you have to say, repeat what you're doing, and they'll end up in the same boat that you're in, Robby. You should be ashamed of yourself.
going to parties or family gatherings, like this is my choice.
Well, it's the wrong one.
It's my body, and I own that. I'm proud of it, and I'm not going to let anybody else really impact that decision because I'm trying to please them or do something that makes them happy. It's not an option for me.
Goodness me, Robby. Goodness. You will definitely not make old bones.
So that's consistency, okay? Now, I also put planning on here as a non-negotiable. And
Get meat and associated fat together, cook to your liking, eat. Planning over. What's next?
When you're living with diabetes, planning is important, okay? It's whether we like it or not, whether
The only thing additional when you're dealing with diabetes, and let's talk about type 1 here, is that you will still need, depending on your level of beta cell destruction in your pancreas and your ability to produce any insulin at all at any level, you will still need to take exogenous insulin of the right kind at the right time in the right dose, which you can get advice from your duly qualified healthcare professional. That's the only thing that's any different. Behavior is still the same. Get meat and fat associated with that meat together. Cook it to your liking. Don't char the hell out of it, please. Eat. Rinse and repeat. Daily. No planning. Excellent.
sometimes we're like, oh, I just want to live a chill day and just kind of like let it happen and see how it goes. That's fine. You can do that. But there's likely going to be consequences to that. And I am very happy to plan my day. So I will sometimes put in my calendar, okay, this is the time I'm eating lunch. This is the time I'm eating dinner. Like sometimes I have to block it off, or at least I put it side by side with another event. If maybe I'm going to be eating while I'm doing something, which is not ideal, but that happens to be my life right now. But I know what I am going to be eating every single meal, either the day before or the morning of. It's
Me too. Meat and animal fat.
one or the other. And
Sometimes eggs, sometimes cheese, sometimes a bit of dairy here and there.
I can always have contingency plans.
Lamb, chicken, pork, beef.
I can adjust. Of course, you learn over the years how to do that. But in our decision tree journal, we have a section for planning where you can write down your breakfast, your lunch, your dinner, and your snacks. And that is a huge...
Snacks? Why would you need snacks? Unless, of course, it's because you're pouring carbohydrates down your neck every single meal of your day, thus causing an insulin spike and a dragging still lower of the blood glucose every time you eat, thus causing you to feel hungry in between your 4 and 5 actual meals as well. So basically you're eating just about every hour of the day. I eat once a day. One meal, once a day. That's all that's required. No snacks. Not required. Also, a lot less planning involved in that.
way to set yourself up for success. So I consider that for me, that's a
Success? Robbie, you wouldn't know how to set somebody up for success. You've got no idea what you're doing here. I hope you've got no idea what you're doing here anyway. Because if you did understand what you were doing here, that makes you one of the more evil individuals that's ever lived. You're not quite in the category of certain famous US doctors who are promoting certain things at the moment. That's for another day. But you'll still be pretty evil if you actually understood what you were doing here. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that you don't understand what the problem is with what you're saying, and that your cognitive dissonance is that thick.
non-negotiable. And the last non-negotiable I want to talk about today is having fun. Enjoy the process.
Okay, well, I really enjoy my lifestyle, my nutritional way of doing things. I enjoy my life. I enjoy my work. Good.
I love every single
So these are this video is entitled 8 Tips on How to Lower Your Blood Sugar. And you've given us none. Most of them aren't even related to blood sugar in any way, Robbie. The things that you did say that you suggested would have a good effect on blood sugar demonstrably, clearly are erroneous and will do no such thing. This is unbelievable, son. Incredible.
bite of food that I consume. And I want you to have the same experience. And I've always said if there's any time I want to eat something different, I will. I eat what I eat because I love it, because I want to. This is not a sacrifice. We are not teaching a program here where you eat a certain food that tastes terrible, but it's good for you. I remember I believed that. That was something I definitely believed before I found out about living this lifestyle. I thought that, oh, you know, if it actually tastes terrible, it's probably better for you. It's probably good. It's probably really nutritious. And that just could not be further from the truth. We are definitely designed to eat foods that make us feel good. That's
Right, so meat and animal fat.
built into us.
Even babies, after they've been weaned and you offer them solid food, and children, it carries on into childhood, it carries on into the teenage years often, and often into adulthood as well for people who actually do understand what's going on here. But you offer a baby some plant material, almost invariably they'll turn their nose up at it. They want meat and fat. They inherently have an instinct. They understand what is nutrition for human beings, and it's not plants. Kids don't want to eat their vegetables because they're not designed for that. You have to indoctrinate a human being into believing that plants are good for them to get them to even start doing it. Okay?
And we can construct our lives in a way where that's what's happening. Okay, you're eating food and
If you're eating plants, you're not eating food, Robby. No.
you're just straight up loving it. So that's a huge non-negotiable for me. And that's it. That's what I have today. Those are the
So nothing is what you have for us, Robby. Absolutely nothing of any value. And the few things you suggested that might be actually of value, you got fundamentally, utterly 180 degrees out of phase wrong with reality. Absolutely appalling video. I believe you're going to be summing up now, and for some reason there's still, 2.5 minutes left of your video and summing up. We won't go through your summing up because it'll be nonsense, and this video is long enough already. There you go. That's what we're dealing with these boys. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. It's unforgivable what these boys are doing. And I hope that this video somehow gets through to at least some of the 74.1 thousand people that subscribe to your ridiculous channel, Robby, so that they can see how utterly, vastly ridiculous the ideology that they're sucking up here is in reality. Thank you very much. Those are my thoughts. Hope you enjoyed the fact that I got through a whole video dealing with these ridiculous boys without using any naughty words whatsoever. Please do reward me appropriately for so doing. See you next time. Until then, adieu, adieu, to you, and you, and you. See you then.